So much to talk about on this. It's kind of fascinating that, you know, Boris Johnson's thrown I wouldn't say thrown a spanner in the works, but he's certainly lobbed something into the pot of debate. So lots to talk about on that. He essentially says that you can't really trust reform when it comes to the heavy lifting, when it comes to the detail. And he's been quite clear on that. He was speaking, of course, with Harry Cole on the Harry Saves the West programme. Tearing in, really, essentially, to Nigel Farage and the party, calling them a threat to Britain's economy and national security. And, of course, this comes after Farage blamed Johnson for a post-Brexit Boris wave of illegal or legal migration that swamped Britain. With reform surging in the polls, the battle for the right wing is heating up. Let's have a listen, a reminder. This is exactly what Boris Johnson said to Harry.
You know, my concerns, as I say, and they're serious concerns, are about the approach to the economy of the Reform Party and the approach on national security. And I think both of those will be severely tested in the years ahead, and people will actually want serious answers. And I think that the answers are going to be conservative.
The answers are going to be conservative, I think that should... we'll speak to James Starkie in a moment, former Home Office advisor. Gawain Towler, how are you doing, Gawain?
Hi there, not too bad at all.
Always good to have you on with us. Is this a sort of, well, let's just remind ourselves, by the way, what Mr Farage said in response to those comments from Boris Johnson. Here it is.
Poor old Boris. Sad, isn't it, really?
Poor old Boris, sad, isn't it? I mean, that will be, I guess, Nigel's response. I mean, I don't think he's making that up. He doesn't look particularly bothered.
I love the idea that Boris Johnson attacked somebody else for not being good at details. That is astonishing. He attacks us for on the economy, and look what happened to the economy under the Conservatives, and the tax rises and the hammering of small business, and it is extraordinary when you've got Farage and Richard Tice going to talk to the Bank of England about serious stuff. We've got Boris. He just said, "I don't trust him on the economy," and has nothing to add to that. It is a very, very weird approach to it. And under Boris, of course, you had sadly the Chancellor, James Starkie, spaffing huge sums of money up the wall on Eat Out to Help Out and things of this sort. It was a disastrous time. So I'm sorry, we're not going to take too many lessons on detail from Boris. I don't do detail Johnson.
I mean, what he's essentially saying, isn't it, that, you know, when you can have your fun with Reform UK, and, you know, there's a lot of bluster and there's a lot of mood music and they're doing stuff in the poll. But when push comes to shove, these new kids on the block won't have a clue. Only the Conservatives know how to do it. That message is the one he's trying to impart. It's a big ask, isn't it?
Clearly, that's the message he's tried to offer and to present. But his own track record suggests precisely the opposite. You've got people like Mr Tice, in people like Farage, who actually do know how the city works. I don't think Boris Johnson knows anything how to work anything apart from an expense account. It's just... he has... The fact that somebody like Danny Crew, the fact that Nadine Dorries came over, the great Boris believers in the case of Nadine, have come over to reform, shows that his style of bluster politics is over. And sadly, in many ways, so is the Conservative Party. When he says the future is Conservative, however, he may not be wrong about that, but it's small c, not big C.
Do you think there is... there was a poll out recently. Peter Barnes, our previous guest, was saying it was for the first time it showed the Tories almost in double digits, and they haven't been there for what seems like a decade. Are they back? I mean, are they reinventing themselves? Are they refinding themselves? Gawain, is there something going on here at Tory HQ?
In Thetford last night, Reform came in the by-election to 44% from a standing start. The Tories dropped by, I think, 17%. Are they back? Does a dead cat bounce? Maybe that does bounce, but I can't see that happening with the Tories. They have so little to offer, and I do not think the people of this country are going to forgive them for the failures of the last 14 years. They've got a long way to go before that happens. And you listen to people like Danny Kruger last Monday when he joined us, talking about how the small c conservatism that I think this country does hold very dear to its heart, that torch has passed from the failed legacy Conservative Party to reform. Now, we've got a long way to go. We do have a lot of work to do, but we are aware of that. We're knuckling down and getting on with that work. When it comes to the general election, we will have a very fine retail offer to the public of policies that have been considered, worked through, and people who actually know how business works, how things like that and the city works, delivering policies that make this country and restore this country back to what it should be.
Being objective and just stepping away from your kind of reform colours, though, I mean, just as a political junkie, which we all are, of course, let's look at it from that perspective. It is extraordinary, isn't it, the Boris Johnson journey? Half an hour ago, Boris Johnson was kind of the Nigel Farage figure of the moment. He was the oven-ready man, he was the sunny uplands king, he was the man that was going to make the world better, he cracked the red wall, he did all of it, came back with a thumping majority.
I recall that breasts would be larger under Conservative governments. I mean, talk about bluster.
That's not going to go down in the great prime ministerial quotes of our time, is it, really?
It's so odd. However, look, Boris was fun. There's no doubt about it. But when push came to shove, when things got tough, he collapsed. When Farage stood the Brexit party down to ensure that Boris could get Brexit done, and then at the first hurdle, when he had the opportunity to go back to Brussels to sort things out, to renegotiate with a big majority of its back, he did nothing. He did nothing and left Northern Ireland drowning in the North Sea and in the Irish Sea. He left part of our country behind. That, to my mind, is one of the greatest failures. Now, we talk about the Boris way, another great failure, but the constitutional failure and the lack of understanding of the importance of sovereignty, I think, yes, you're right. Boris was a fun character, and in many ways, Farage is a fun character. But I think the difference is people have prospered on believing and trusting what Farage said because he sticks to his word, he sticks with it. Whereas I don't believe there's anybody in these islands who has done well out of believing a word that Boris Johnson has ever uttered. Neither his editors, nor his proprietors, nor the general public, nor women.
And on that profound and powerful moment, Gawain, where we stop there, thank you, Gawain Towler, political strategist, always hate that word, reform member, and of course very, very close to Reform UK still. Let's get a word from James Starkie, former Home Office advisor at the time when Boris Johnson was Prime Minister. I mean, that was fairly damning stuff, James. Do you recognise the former boss at the time when you were advising the Home Office? Is that the man you remember?
I mean, I think it's interesting. I mean, I've got a lot of time for Gawain, and I think he does touch on a point, which is that it's no doubt the electorate were disappointed with the Conservatives after the last election. You only need to look at the result. But I think, Boris's attack on Farage also do land on something. You talked with Gawain there about the comparisons between the two. I mean, one of the interesting things in terms of where we are right now is if you look at polling, there was some polling by YouGov in the last month or two, and it showed something to me that's very interesting, which touches on what we're talking about, which is only kind of 24% of people think that Farage would do a good job of running the country, but 32% or thereabouts think he would do a better job than anyone else. So you've got almost like 10% of people who are saying, I don't think he's very good, but I think he's better than what we've got and what we've had. And that is kind of where we are, and is why Farage is able to kind of launch policies like the stuff on indefinite leave to remain last week, which was full of holes, and they had to reverse a lot of it within 48 hours, but doesn't seem to do them a great amount of damage.
Do you think that we're just in completely new terrain now, that people aren't necessarily comparing? I mean, some will obviously be going, well, Nigel Farage, he's not any of the above, so, and he can't be any worse than what's out there, let's give it a go, which has usually been the way. I think that's how Keir Starmer found himself really in number 10. But I wonder whether there's just been a sort of huge shift in the way we judge or our appetites for what we want from a political party, where it's no longer the comparison game, and Farage and Reform are feeling like a party that will just do things differently. They won't be the same pre-prepared press release parties of the past. That wasn't meant to be alliteration, by the way, but it came out rather well. But you take my point. They are just a completely new outfit, and they're going to do things very differently.
Yeah, I think it's exactly that. Basically, the first thing you need to understand, I believe, when you try and look at what's going on, why people moving to reform, supporting Farage, is that people are fundamentally very, very angry. And that's a large amount of time. So Gawain is right when he criticises the last Conservative government. There were things that we failed on. And before that, the Labour government, this goes all the way back really to the financial crash in 2008. People were promised various things, whether it be on, migration by the Conservatives, we've had a stagnant economy for over a decade. And so they're kind of fed up. So I think with Farage, what you see is people saying, we're not really sure he'd be a very good Prime Minister. We're not really sure he'd be over the detail. And I think Boris is absolutely right when he criticises their economic plans. I mean, this morning, Farage didn't seem to rule out political control of the Bank of England, which, they were talking about I'm not sure how the markets would react to that. And I'd be interested to know if I'm surprised we haven't seen an attack from the Conservative Party on that, to be honest. But those are the kinds of things that, as we get close to an election, might have an impact, because there's no doubt they've got pretty strong support amongst kind of 20 to 25% of the population, of the voting population. They need to be pushing towards 35% to get a majority. And I think that's where it will get dicey, when people will have questions about reform's kind of competence or detail.
When you were working with the Home Office, when Boris Johnson was Prime Minister, and, to begin with, of course, 2017, for a couple of years, it was, riding on the crest of a wave, and along comes Boris. He's penetrating all these red wall areas, doing rather well, thumping majority. Everyone assumed he'd be there for 2 terms. Can't overturn an 80 majority. How many of us said that? Forever, almost. But was there a sense when he was in charge? Do you ever remember being at a meeting when a Downing Street diktat came down the line and hearing somebody go, this man's nuts? Because he was unconventional. And I don't mean to be rude to Boris Johnson, but was there a sense that he was in control as Prime Minister despite the bluster, or was it as chaotic as it sometimes seems now?
No, I certainly never heard that. I mean, I spent a bit of time with Boris, so I wouldn't claim to be super close to him. I think he's an incredibly intelligent man. He's proven himself a serial election winner. I think in terms of, under his government, I do, I watched the interview, or Harry Cole's interview with him. I do think on immigration, look, I think that it was a new system. The interesting question I haven't seen answered from Reform is, would they have a new immigration points-based system? Because Farage was always pro a points-based system. This is what the system we have is now. I think you can use that to bring down migration quite easily. You just kind of change the points and the salary thresholds and so on. I think that in those years after Brexit, we didn't get on top of the numbers, but Boris is also right to point out that who are those people do you want to throw out? Do you want to throw out the Hong Kong BNO passport holders? Do you want to throw out the Ukrainians, the nurses, there was a pent-up demand of kind of healthcare after COVID, and so I think it's a correct criticism that we didn't get on top of the numbers as much as we could, and so to defend them all would be wrong. But I think it's not as black and white as saying it was complete incompetence. That's not true. Yeah. The system that Boris oversaw to be set up under Priti Patel is a system that's still in use now, and actually I think probably Nigel Farage will use himself to bring down numbers. Just a very final point. We'll have to be brief, James. Can the Conservatives win the next election? No. If that's the brief answer. No, indeed. I think that's just unrealistic. Well, I would agree with you. We have Peter Barnes, the strategist, with us in the first section of the show, and he thinks they still can. No, I don't think it's possible they can win the next election. I think the fight for the Conservatives is to come out of the next election still being a relevant party. To get from where they are to a majority, I think I just don't believe it's possible, particularly with the right split. OK, James, on that point, thank you. Great to have you on with us. James Starkie, former Home Office advisor when Boris Johnson was Prime Minister. You heard Gawain Towler from Reform UK before that. 0344 499 1000. Boris Johnson's contention is you can't trust reform. When it all boils down, when all the flurry and all the great quips about swans and goodness knows what else is done,
You can't trust them. Only the Conservatives are the answer, says Boris Johnson. Said it right here on Talk, speaking to Harry Cole just yesterday. Your thoughts on that?